Good afternoon, First Baptist family. I hope you guys are all doing well. I'm looking forward to today, going to kind of wrap up our devotional series in James. Now, before I start, though, there's some information that I don't know if it was necessarily made public on Facebook, but yesterday was Toby's birthday. So if you haven't had a chance, you should definitely get a hold of him and wish him a happy belated birthday. I'm sure that he probably wouldn't mind that. I totally forgot. But then again, I also totally forgot that it was Memorial Day weekend. You could tell that I've been kind of a little bit thrown off my game. But, so again, if you haven't wished Toby a happy birthday, wish him a happy late birthday. And he's downstairs in his office, so he doesn't know I'm saying this right now. But again, so today we want to go through and wrap up our devotional series in Nehemiah. And we've talked about over the past several weeks a couple different things. First, we covered what we can do as we get ready to rebuild. We talked about dealing with external opposition. And then last week we talked about some internal issues that we may run into within the church. Now today, I want to talk about kind of finishing rebuilding, or kind of that end point. And so we're going to be in Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 15, all the way through Nehemiah chapter 7, verse 4. So I want to read that for you guys. So we jump in, it says, verse 15 says, "So the wall was finished on the 25th of the month of Elul, in 52 days. And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem. For they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God. Moreover, in those days, the nobles of Judah sent many letters to Tobiah, and Tobiah's letters came to them. For many in Judah were bound by oath to him, because he was the son-in-law of Shechaniah, the son of Arah, and his son Johanan had taken the daughter of Meshullam, the son of Berechiah, as his wife. Also they spoke of his good deeds in my presence and reported my words to him, and Tobiah sent letters to make me afraid." Now, and then it continues on. In verse 7 then says, "Now when the wall had been built, and I had set up the doors, and the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites had been appointed, I gave my brother Hananiah and Hananiah the governor of the castle charge over Jerusalem." Now we're going to stop right there. We'll continue on in a bit. So I wanted to come over and kind of talk about this. Now we're going through, I'm sure many of you have tuned into the news. I'm not sure how many of you are news junkies. I'm not necessarily. I have other individuals that I pester for my news sources, and they give me the summary. I do some. But, you're seeing that states are starting to reopen. States are gradually starting to get back, try to get back to normal. Their kind of, everyday life. Even necessarily around here, we're starting to see some stuff kind of spring back up. And I was in Walmart and I saw that they finally have toilet paper again. So things are getting a little bit back to normal. But the thing is, too, as we talked about the idea of rebuilding, it's still happening. It's still going to happen. And so a couple things that we need to remember as we work through that, I wanted to go over with you guys. The first thing that you want to do is don't stress about the timeline don't stress about the rebuilding timeline. A lot of times we have this tendency where we kind of build up these expectations or this timeline of like, okay, this is how long things are going to take, and and we're good to go. I sometimes have that where I kind of like start to over plan and be like, oh man, it's gonna, we're gonna do this and this and this and this, and we're good. This is one of those things where we should not stress about that timeline. We shouldn't say, well, we should all be good to go. The church should be back to normal within X amount of time. We want that. Now we look at verse 15 of chapter 6. It says, "So the wall was finished on the 25th day of the month Elul." Now, we talked about we look at that. The rebuilding of Jerusalem, what we've looked at, has taken less than 6 months. We go through and we may be thinking about, oh man, it's taken so long to do this and so long to that. But yet we see how God worked. Think that, we'll look at all these different things about rebuilding, saying things will never be the same. After all that has happened, schools will never be the same, all of this stuff. And we all worry about that. Now, what we look at in verse 16, it kind of goes on. "And when all our enemies heard of it, all the nations around us were afraid and fell greatly in their own esteem. For they perceived that this work had been accomplished with the help of our God." So why did the rebuilding of Jerusalem take that time? God is involved. God is, guiding that. And the thing is, too, God was in control when Nehemiah was rebuilding Jerusalem, and he's still in control right now. Now, again, like I've talked about, we're not like we're going out there, we're rebuilding buildings or anything like that. We're kind of rebuilding back to what things were back in February, March kind of things. But as we need to focus, as we start to reopen and get back to the things, we need to realize that, whatever the timeline is, we have our own timeline, but God has the ultimate timeline of what is going to happen and how that's working. As we do that, as we look in, we need to trust God and realize that God knows when that rebuilding process will be done. And we may need to remind ourselves that every single day, maybe write it on your calendar, God is in control every day. There's a lot. You can get creative with reminding yourself that. Put stuff on your phone, but constantly look back and realize that, in terms of the timeline of how long it will be, God knows, and he's going to make sure that he sees that through. So that's our first thing, is don't concern yourself or worry about that rebuilding timeline. The next thing may not necessarily be the most popular one, but it's respect the appointed leaders. And again, like I said, it may not be a hugely popular point, and I'm live streaming, so you can't throw anything at me. So now we go look at verse 7, though. Chapter 7, verse 1 and 2 says, "Now when the wall had been built, and I had set up the doors, and the gatekeepers, the singers, and the Levites had been appointed, I gave my brother Hanani and Hananiah, the governor of the castle, charge over Jerusalem. For he was a more faithful and God-fearing man than many." Now, the rebuilding closes. Nehemiah goes through, make sure that there's leadership in place to go through and run things. And, those who are placed in leadership, there's a reason for that. Now we see right here, it says, for he was a more faithful and God-fearing man than many. Now that's like, oh, well, that's easy. I would have no problem following a person like that. But that's the thing, is those that are in place, and Toby has done his study on government, his sermon series on government. If you haven't watched that, take some time to review that. I thought it was a great series to cover, and it folds right into this. We can very easily get long-winded about what the government should or should not have done. There are a ton of articles out there online that cover that. But the thing is, that's not going to help us any better rebuild or finish rebuilding if we think about what people should have done. We need to think about what we need to do. If you're going to disagree on opinions, respectfully disagree, if anything, but don't go blasting them on Facebook or in conversation. And this is as important a piece for me as it is for anyone else. Us going through and bad-mouthing people is not going to do anything to help us rebuild. As much as we may disagree about how things were handled, it's not going to help us do anything going forward. Devote your energies to helping things improve, to helping grow others and minister to others. That's what we should be doing. And then the third point is, remember the work isn't finished. Now, I tricked you guys. I talked about finishing the rebuilding. I pulled a dirty pastor trick. Again, you should know that. I keep learning from Toby. So the building, and now we go to chapter 7, verse 4. It says, "The city was wide and large, but the people within it were few, and no houses had been rebuilt." So the walls of Jerusalem had been finished. Yeah, they had been fixed up. The gates were up. Everything. They were good to go. But that doesn't mean things are complete. They still didn't have a lot of people there. There were houses that hadn't been built. Those things had kind of taken a back seat to the reconstruction. So they had gone through and built up the external and done that, and that's great. Well, and in today, when everything opens back up, that doesn't mean that things are done for us. We have a community to reach out to here in Horseheads or in Maine or in Pennsylvania. Who knows where you're viewing from, but you have a community that you can work in and you can reach out to. Now, here's the thing, though. As we think about working, it's a continuous process. Rebuilding is going to be a continuous process. At the beginning of this year, back technically right before the year started, I went and I got a gym membership at Planet Fitness. I haven't really used that recently. I would, but I can't. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going through, I was working on building up, trying to burn fat, trying to get a little bit more in shape, work on my muscles and everything. Well, say what happens if I kind of hit my weight goal? I hit my fitness goal. I'm like, yep, I got my six-pack abs now. I'm good to go. You can't really hear the sound, but I don't sound like I have a six-pack right now, though. But say I hit that point, I'm like, yeah, I'm right at my perfect weight. I've got the perfect amount of muscles. I'm golden. And then I stop going to the gym. Stop worrying about it. Do you think I would continue to look manly and cool? No, I probably would not. I'm not saying I look manly and cool now, but I'd probably eventually look like Thor does in Avengers Endgame. And, I'd be probably rocking the dad bod. It's the same way with ministering and rebuilding. We don't just stop working when it looks like things are done. We keep going. We keep ministering. We keep reaching out to those around us. It's going to take time, but it's well worth it in terms of our community, in terms of within our body, the body here, and within our families, our core groups as well. So I would challenge you guys again too, as we kind of conclude this devotional series. I'm going to have a new series for you that I will be bringing to you guys next week. But I want you guys to take what I've talked about with you guys and be ready and excited. I know I'm super excited to start to be able to see people, to be able to rebuild with the rest of you guys and partnering as a group and ministering and continuing, and to hear about times when we've been apart where you've been able to reach out. I can't wait to hear those things. Now, let's emerge from this ready to continue God's work and utilize this opportunity to reach out to those around us. Again, I miss you guys. I love you guys. I cannot wait to see all of you guys. Looking forward to that. Tune in tomorrow. Toby will be back with you guys tomorrow with some announcements and another devotional. I love you guys, and we'll see you soon.